Alcatraz has always been more than just cold concrete and water. It's a mystery wrapped in danger, fog, and legends, a symbol of ultimate control. For decades, people have looked at that jagged island in San Francisco Bay wondering, did they make it? Could anyone really escape from Alcatraz, the infamous fortress? Could anyone survive the ruthless conditions? Now, in 2025, a new twist has emerged. A twist so detailed, so well thought out, it's turning everything we thought we knew about the prison upside down. But don't expect a neat ending. This story isn't about heroes or villains. It's about shadows, science, and a silent night that still holds secrets. What really happened inside those cell walls? And how close are we now to understanding the truth? Alcatraz was never just a prison. It was a symbol of American incarceration at its most extreme. Officially known as Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, it was often simply called The Rock. Located on a small island in San Francisco Bay, about 125 miles off the coast, Alcatraz was originally a military fort built in the 1850s. By 1934, it was converted into a federal prison, designed to house the most dangerous criminals. It became the U.S. government's ultimate method of dealing with those it couldn't control elsewhere. Alcatraz was made for criminals who couldn't be housed at other prisons. The men sent to Alcatraz were the worst of the worst, violent offenders, escape artists, and individuals so dangerous that regular prisons couldn't hold them. Alcatraz was built with one goal in mind: to ensure that these inmates could not escape. It became a symbol of the U.S. government's toughest approach to prison life. The prison itself was a feat of engineering. The main cell house, constructed between 1910 and 1912, consisted of 4 blocks of cells, a dining hall, a hospital, a library, and administrative offices. The cells were small, bare, and made with steel bars that couldn't be cut or broken. Prisoners were counted multiple times a day, up to 13 times, to ensure none of them went missing. Security at Alcatraz was unmatched. The prison had metal detectors, tear gas, and armed guards who stood in elevated gun galleries, ensuring no one could get away. The ratio of guards to prisoners was one of the lowest in the country. If you were an inmate at Alcatraz, you were under constant surveillance. The prison didn't just imprison people. It kept them locked up in the most controlled environment possible. The goal was clear. These men would not escape. Period. Life in Alcatraz was extremely strict. Everything had to be earned. Access to privileges like working, having visitors, and even talking during meals was controlled. If you wanted any small luxury or freedom, you had to work for it. Daily life at Alcatraz was psychologically taxing, designed to break inmates down mentally and physically. With a capacity for about 312 inmates, Alcatraz rarely filled to capacity. It housed some of the most notorious criminals in American history, like Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. Some of the worst offenders were sent to D Block, which contained the Hole, solitary confinement cells where conditions were so brutal, they were considered inhumane. Racial segregation was a constant reality, and rehabilitation wasn't a priority. Alcatraz wasn't about helping prisoners change, it was about controlling them. Over the years, Alcatraz underwent several upgrades to increase security. In the 1930s and 1940s, new locking systems were installed and electrified fences were added to further prevent escapes. The prison was constantly being updated to keep up with the evolving threats of its time. Despite these improvements, Alcatraz was eventually closed on March 21, 1963. The prison had become too costly to maintain. The salt water from the surrounding bay had caused the buildings to corrode, and it became more expensive to repair the facility than it was worth. The closure of Alcatraz was seen as the end of an era. However, the legacy of Alcatraz continued. Today, Alcatraz is managed as a museum by the National Park Service, and it draws more than 1 million visitors every year. The prison's history and its status as one of the toughest penitentiaries in the country are preserved for future generations. The prison's walls were strong, but its legend, its myth, was even stronger. That myth became central to one of the greatest mysteries in American history, Alcatraz was more than just a prison. It was a symbol of control. It was meant to represent the final word in American imprisonment. Perched on a windswept island in San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz wasn't just a place to serve time. It was where the U.S. government sent prisoners it couldn't deal with anywhere else. It wasn't just a prison. It was a fortress that symbolized the ultimate defeat of those who tried to escape. The prison's isolation, the design of the cell blocks, and the grueling daily routines created an enduring myth. Escape from Alcatraz was not only impossible but unthinkable. For nearly 3 decades, no one had ever successfully escaped. Over 14 escape attempts were recorded, but most were either captured, killed, or presumed drowned after vanishing into the freezing waters of the bay. The harsh conditions, the deadly tides, the freezing temperatures, and the distance from shore made the bay itself an almost impenetrable barrier. To attempt an escape was to sign your own death warrant. The image of Alcatraz as inescapable wasn't just a myth. It was reinforced by the facts. The prison was designed to make escape seem impossible, and for a long time it succeeded. That all changed in June 1962. On the night of June 11th, 3 inmates, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, managed to escape from their cells and disappear. This escape didn't just challenge the myth of Alcatraz, it shattered it. The fact that the prison had been outsmarted, even once, was enough to shake the belief that it was truly inescapable. The psychological impact was immediate. Alcatraz had been taken off its pedestal. Once considered the fortress that could never be breached, it was now seen as a place that could, in fact, be outwitted. The escape changed the way people viewed the prison, and the mystery of what happened to the men who made it out grew. This wasn't just another prison break. It became part of the legend of Alcatraz, a story that still captivates people to this day. Frank Morris wasn't your average inmate. He was a seasoned criminal with a brilliant mind and a history of escapes. Born in 1926, Morris had been through a rough life. Orphaned at 11 and convicted of his first crime at 13, he spent much of his youth moving between foster homes and institutions. This instability hardened him and sharpened his instincts for survival. Morris had a long list of crimes, including armed robbery and drug possession. He had also escaped from multiple prisons, which made him the perfect candidate for Alcatraz. In January 1960, after fleeing the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Morris was transferred to Alcatraz. But from the moment he arrived, he was already thinking about how he would escape. Once at Alcatraz, Morris was placed near fellow inmates John and Clarence Anglin, who he had met in other prisons. The 3 men quickly became friends and began planning their escape. Their cells were next to each other, which allowed them to communicate and share ideas. It didn't take long for Morris to take the lead. His experience and intelligence made him the natural architect of the escape plan. The escape plan took months to develop. Morris, the Anglin brothers, and another inmate, Alan West, spent countless hours secretly digging through the crumbling concrete behind their sinks. They used stolen metal spoons, saw blades, and even a vacuum cleaner motor to make a homemade drill. Morris covered the sounds of their work by playing his accordion during the music hour, a daily event where inmates were allowed to play instruments. The men had to be precise. Every move was calculated. They fashioned life jackets and a raft out of stolen raincoats, using steam pipes from the prison's plumbing system to seal the rubber. They even created a makeshift air pump using a concertina. Their escape was no longer just about getting out of their cells. It was about outsmarting the entire prison. John and Clarence Anglin were more than just fellow inmates, they were brothers. Born into a poor farming family in Florida, they learned how to survive together from a young age. Their lives of crime centered around bank robberies, and they were repeatedly sent to different prisons for their offenses. Finally, they were sent to Alcatraz, where they were reunited with Frank Morris. At Alcatraz, the Anglins joined forces with Morris to plan the escape. While Morris took the lead in engineering the plan, the Anglins were instrumental in helping gather materials and cover up their activities. They used their prison jobs to gather the tools they needed. They also helped make the life jackets and the raft, stitching together more than 50 raincoats. They also created the infamous dummy heads, made from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair. These heads were placed on the pillows of the escapees' beds, giving the illusion that they were still sleeping during the nightly head count. The guards, fooled by the deception, never noticed the escape until the next morning. By then, Morris and the Anglins had already made their way to the roof and fled into the night. On June 11, 1962, the trio made their escape. The night was quiet and they moved swiftly. The escapees made it to the northeast shore of the island where they launched their homemade raft. They paddled across the cold, treacherous waters of San Francisco Bay, making their way to Angel Island just under 2 miles away. Despite the careful planning, the escape didn't go unnoticed. A paddle was found by the Coast Guard on June 14th, and a week later, pieces of the raft were discovered near the Golden Gate Bridge. These findings suggested that the escape had been successful, but the men themselves were never found. Some believed they had drowned in the bay, but others, like FBI agents and investigators, weren't so sure. The escape was so meticulously planned that many believed the men could have survived. In 2013, a letter allegedly from John Anglin claimed that the 3 men had indeed escaped and were living in hiding. The letter reignited interest in the case and brought fresh attention to the mystery of what happened to Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Were they alive? Did they really make it out? The questions remain unanswered to this day. In 2013, more than 50 years after the escape, a letter was sent to the San Francisco Police Department, allegedly written by John Anglin. The letter claimed that all 3 men had escaped, but barely survived. It said that Frank Morris died in 2005, Clarence Anglin in 2008, and John himself was terminally ill and willing to negotiate his surrender for medical treatment. The letter reignited interest in the case and led to a renewed investigation by the FBI. However, the handwriting on the letter didn't match known samples from the Anglins, and there was no hard evidence to support its authenticity. Some believed it was a hoax while others thought it might be real. The case remained unresolved. For years, investigators believed that the men had drowned in the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. But new scientific research in 2014 challenged this belief. Using advanced computer modeling, Dutch researchers reconstructed the tidal conditions on the night of the escape, and found that it was possible for the escapees to have survived if they launched the raft at the right time. This new information sparked renewed interest in the case. The possibility that the men could have made it to shore alive raised new questions. Could the escape have succeeded? Had the men really defied the odds and made it to freedom? The mystery of Alcatraz remains unsolved. Whether the men died in the bay or escaped to live new lives in hiding, one thing is clear. The escape from Alcatraz stands as one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Alcatraz remains a symbol of American incarceration, and the mystery of the escape from the rock continues to captivate people around the world. Whether or not the escapees survived, their daring escape has become a legend, a story of human ingenuity and defiance against a system that seemed unbeatable. The questions may never be fully answered, but the mystery of Alcatraz lives on, a tale that continues to challenge our ideas of what's possible and what's not. Do you think they made it out alive, or did the bay claim them for good? Let us know your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this mystery, give this video a like, hit subscribe for more true crime and history deep dives, and don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss what's next. Now check out the next video on your screen. You won't believe